Okay, let's unpack this. We are diving into an item that is, I think, arguably the most famous and at the same time the most misunderstood piece of martial arts equipment on the planet.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, you know the image. It's instantly synonymous with martial arts mastery. The lightning fast strikes, that blur of motion, the iconic yellow jumpsuit, and those two sticks connected by a short chain.
We are talking, of course, about the Nunchaku or, Nunchuck sticks, karate sticks, whatever you call them growing up.
Right.
Its global fame is just undeniable. It's driven almost entirely by these cinematic powerhouses, from Bruce Lee's work in films like Enter the Dragon to, well, Michelangelo and the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
But here's the core contradiction that our sources kept pointing to. The nunchaku is instantly recognizable, right? But its actual history, its intended purpose,
Yeah.
it's all widely debated.
Mhm.
You hear the story that it was an ancient rice flail, a humble peasant's tool. And then you also hear it's a deadly weapon of the Okinawan nobility. So which is it? Is it a farm tool, a combat weapon, or just, a performance prop?
And that is precisely our mission for this deep dive. We're going to trace the surprising, really complex history of this Okinawan Kobudo weapon, understand its journey from an aristocratic tool to a martial arts legend.
And this is the really fascinating part.
Yeah, and investigate the massive global moral panic that made it illegal in so many places, only for it to be revived today in some really unexpected roles, including, police control and even competitive sport.
So let's start with that legend, the one everyone knows.
Right.
If you ask 10 people about where the nunchaku comes from, I bet 9 of them will tell you it was originally a short flail used by Okinawan peasants.
To thresh rice or soybeans, yeah.
Yeah.
It's the ultimate story, right? The downtrodden using their farm tools to fight off oppressive samurai.
It's a great story. And it feels right because it's reinforced by the general history of Okinawan martial arts, or Kobudo.
Exactly. You see other famous weapons in that tradition that genuinely were adapted from common everyday tools.
Right. Our sources point out that the tonfa, or tunkua, that was adapted from handles, used to carry water buckets.
And the iku, the boat oar, was used by fishermen. So the whole context of adaptation is definitely there.
But when you look specifically at the nunchaku, that rice flail story, it gets complicated and fast.
It does, because there are these powerful alternative theories suggesting it wasn't a flail at all. Some historical analysis suggests it might have been an Okinawan horse bit called a Muge.
A horse bit.
Yeah, used to control a horse's movements. Others propose it was adapted from a wooden clapper, a Hyoshigi, that the village night-watchman carried to signal danger.
Okay, so we've got 3 competing ideas. Rice flail, horse bit, night-watchman's clapper. But this is where the sources get really interesting and just challenge that whole romantic peasant narrative. Our deep dive strongly suggests that the story of rebellious peasants secretly training with farm tools is, well, that's likely an exaggeration, probably created by martial arts schools in the 20th century to add a bit of historical flavor.
What's fascinating here is when you understand the true social and political context in Okinawa at the time. Martial arts, especially the really specialized ones like Kobudo, were practiced almost exclusively by the aristocracy.
The Kazoku.
The Kazoku, and the serving nobles, the Shizoku.
So to put it simply for you, these were the gentry, the noble families, not the common people, the Heimin, who were generally forbidden from practicing any kind of organized combat.
Exactly, which makes the adaptation story less about desperate commoners and more about desperate nobles.
So why were the nobles suddenly looking at everyday objects as potential weapons?
It all comes down to those infamous weapons bans.
This is such a huge point. King Shoshin started the bans way back in 1477, but the situation got really critical when the Japanese Satsuma clan invaded and tightened those restrictions in 1609.
And that move didn't just strip people of their weapons. It specifically stripped the noble class of their positions and their power.
So when the aristocracy loses the right to carry a sword, which is, the ultimate status symbol and the tool of their class, they need discreet alternatives.
They couldn't just pick up a stick. They needed sophisticated, adaptable tools that could be hidden or, explained away as something harmless. The nunchaku, whether it came from a horse bit or a clapper, fits that noble need for discreet, effective self-defense perfectly.
It's a brilliant historical reversal. The nunchaku wasn't the weapon of the oppressed. It was the discreet weapon of the dispossessed gentry.
That's right. And this aristocratic tradition was preserved and formalized, not through whispered stories, but through established systematic lineages.
Like the Matayoshi Kobudo system.
A key example. Our sources mention Shinko Matayoshi, born in 1888, learned Nunchaku jutsu from a master Irei, and the art was then passed down through structured forms called kata, making sure these complex movements were preserved.
So the history shows us this was a noble adaptation, a secret weapon solidified by drills. But to really understand why it became so feared, we need to look at the engineering of the weapon itself. Let's shift from history to the physics of it.
The basic mechanics are simple, right? Two handles, about 30 centimeters each, connected by rope or chain. But the old martial arts debate has always been about that connection, that articulation.
Yeah, does the hinged action limit the power, or does the flail effect actually multiply it far beyond what a straight stick could do?
A straight stick, like a bow staff, delivers a really powerful direct impact. But proponents of the nunchaku argue the flail lets the striking end reach extreme velocities in much less time and space.
Because the end of the handle is traveling in an arc, it can theoretically accelerate faster than a straight weapon that has to travel, a longer distance.
And crucially, it can bypass blocks. You use a stick to block a straight strike, you stop the force. But the nunchaku can potentially just wrap right around a defense.
But there's a design detail that our sources highlight that really explains its brutal effectiveness, and it's something you won't find on the average consumer nunchuck.
You're talking about the octagonal cross-section.
Exactly.
This is really the difference between a toy and a proper Kobudo weapon. Traditional Okinawan handles often have this octagonal shape, the hakaku. And it's not for looks. It's smart design for two very important reasons.
The first one is grip and control, right?
Absolutely. A perfectly round handle can easily twist or slip in your hand when it makes contact, especially if you're sweating. Those 8 flat edges of the hakaku give you a much more secure grip.
Which you would need for those lightning-fast movements.
And the second reason is just pure focused impact. Those sharp edges are designed to concentrate all the force of the strike into a much smaller surface area.
So instead of a flat surface that disperses the energy?
Right. The edge channels that energy like a cleaver, which severely raises the probability of breaking a bone or causing deep tissue damage.
So the nobles weren't just adapting random objects. They were engineering sophisticated weapons.
Without a doubt. And this idea of control is so key to understanding its modern use, because the nunchaku is also an incredible grappling and restraint device, not just for striking.
That brings us to that non-striking application, the pinching or fulcrum technique. This is where you wrap the cord around a limb or wrist, an elbow, and use the two handles for leverage.
And that leverage is what gives it its non-lethal power, especially in law enforcement systems. Sources note that this technique can generate as much as 350 pounds of pressure per square inch for control.
So the goal is quick pain compliance, using minimal strength, and without actually, hitting someone.
Exactly. But the public didn't know the nunchaku as a discreet, noble weapon or a police tool. Its global fame came from pure spectacle.
Specifically, Bruce Lee.
The cultural influence of Bruce Lee's skills in films like Enter the Dragon in 1973 just cannot be overstated. He launched that weapon into the global consciousness. Everyone wanted to be able to do those twirls.
And that impression that it was lightning fast, instantly lethal, and easy to get, that led directly to a moral panic, which triggered this sudden widespread wave of bans in the 1970s.
The legal fallout was incredibly swift. New York banned chuck-a-sticks entirely in 1974, just fueled by this fear that muggers would suddenly become Bruce Lee overnight.
And California, Arizona, and Massachusetts followed right behind.
And it wasn't just in the U.S. Our research shows that in places like the UK and Germany, the censorship got almost, comical.
They weren't just banning the weapon, they were editing it out of kids' shows.
It's the ultimate example of media-driven fear. In the UK, they had to rename the series Teenage Mutant Hero Turtles. They dropped the word ninja, and they literally edited Michelangelo's Nunchaku out of the broadcast.
What did they replace it with?
A grappling hook. Think about that. Cartoon version of 2 sticks and a string was considered too dangerous for kids to even see.
It's just incredible how quickly that institutional paranoia, fueled by Hollywood, could lead to such sweeping bans. It became illegal because of what people saw in movies.
Not because of what was actually happening in reality, no.
Which raises the question of how laws rooted in panic hold up over time, because decades later, the legal foundation for those bans started to crumble.
This brings us to the landmark case in the U.S., Maloney v. Singas in New York in 2018. It challenged the constitutionality of the state's nunchaku ban.
And the judge's finding was just devastating to that original moral panic argument.
Yeah, the court found that nunchaku were in common use, for lawful purposes, like martial arts training and sport, and that there was virtually no evidence linking them to any significant criminal conduct.
In all the decades the ban was in place.
Right. So the law was overturned as unconstitutional.
And they actually quantified it. The court noted that between 1995 and 2018, almost 65,000 nunchaku were sold in the U.S. alone.
Which completely undermines the idea that it was mainly a tool for criminals. That ruling set a huge precedent. Arizona legalized them in 2019. California repealed its ban in 2021. It's a major legal shift.
Yet, here is that amazing paradox we mentioned. While courts were overturning bans for citizens, police departments were simultaneously adopting the weapon.
As a non-lethal tool, yeah. We're talking about the Orkut Police Nunchaku system, the OPN. It was adopted by over 200 law enforcement agencies.
But crucially, the OPN wasn't for those cinematic strikes.
No, not at all. It was designed strictly for restraint control and pain compliance. The advantage was leverage. It allowed an officer of any size to control a suspect with minimal force.
Which, looks a lot better than wrestling someone to the ground or using a baton.
But it's also important to note the end of that story. Despite the initial success, the system faced challenges. Improper use led to injuries, like broken wrists, and eventually a lot of departments phased them out.
Replaced by what, tasers?
Mostly tasers or retractable batons, yeah. Tools that are less technically demanding.
So it's a tool so complex that even formalized police use had problems. But the Nunchaku story doesn't end there.
Absolutely not. The final chapter is its transformation into a specialized, high-speed competitive sport.
Right. Organizations like the World Nunchaku Association, the WNA, and the Freestyle Nunchaku Forum, the FNF, they now govern global competitions.
And this is where the weapon really lives up to that cinematic reputation. You have semi-contact fights with protective gear, and you have pure freestyle events judged on technicality and speed.
And the speeds are genuinely astonishing. Our sources cite Guinness World Records that just illustrate the dexterity required.
For instance, Chirag Luka in the UK achieved 132 figure of eights in just 30 seconds.
Wait, that's over 4 rotations a second.
Per second, yeah. And then you have Mohammad Rashid in Pakistan, who managed 193 in 1 minute. He also broke 100 targets in only 43 seconds, which shows the precision too.
And this isn't just a niche thing.
Not at all. Champions like JJ Nunchaku from Belgium has won the FNF World Cup 5 times in a row. This is a highly technical, demanding global sport.
So what does this all mean for you, listening to this? The journey of the Nunchaku is just this powerful story of pure adaptation.
It was maybe a horse bit, refined by Okinawan nobility, shot to global fame by Bruce Lee, then subjected to this huge moral panic and censorship.
And today, it's both a non-lethal police tool and a high-speed competitive sport.
The thing that stands out most clearly from our sources is that legal path. The fact that courts had to step in decades later and point out that a weapon famous from the movies had, and I'm quoting, virtually no evidence of being used for serious crime is just extraordinary.
It really encourages us to think about how quickly public perception, fueled by media, fueled by pop culture, can completely derail laws, affecting the right to possess even the most exotic historical equipment. The Nunchaku proves that perception, when it's amplified by Hollywood, can become fact in the eyes of the law no matter what the reality is.